Okay, here we go. This is the first one. Brian Mailey, very pleased to be here.
Hello!
I'm going to play for a minute and then we'll start all the questions and answers. Okay, we're in the key of E. Yay!
Hey!
Brilliant, great. Right, questions and questions. I'm going to put the guitar down because there is that horrible temptation to go to just like a nervous tick. Just
Exactly.
It's awful. Right, so first question to Brian is what was your first guitar? I know this, don't I?
Yeah, you do know, you do know.
Yeah.
My first guitar, which I have with me, is I was very lucky to have come from a musical family. So my mum was a primary school teacher, played piano, which was my first instrument. Piano was my first instrument, but my dad sang and played guitar, and there was always loads and loads of guitars around the house. So he had Tellys and Stratocasters, so I got the lend of all of his gear. But the first guitar that Dad bought me was a Gibson U2. So for those people who will frantically go on to Google and have a look at that, it was Gibson's, I suppose, it was the mid 80s.
Yeah.
So we were in Yngwie territory. So it was all about Super Strats, Kramers, Jacksons. So I had a Gibson U2. So that's my first guitar. Floyd Rose, 24 frets.
I had a look at Brian's guitar and I made a couple of guesses. I thought it was called maybe a Mark III Explorer or something. I was wrong with it.
Yeah.
U2. Right, so who's the first guitar player you really liked? Or first time you were aware of the guitar?
First time I was there, I want to say Thin Lizzy, but I can't really.
Right.
The first time I was really aware of the guitar was Status Quo.
Well, that's the same with a lot of us. Yeah.
Status Quo. I remember heading away on school trips, and people would stick on 12 gold bars.
Oh yeah.
12 gold bars, and you can't go wrong with that. But what really, I remember that on the BBC. When it was a live show that they broadcast on BBC late at night, and it was Status Quo live at the NEC, 1982.
Right.
So John Coughlin wasn't in the band, and they
Right.
brought Pete Kirscher in to play drums. And when I saw that first drone of the F, you hear that drone of the F and the crowd shouting, for Quo, and then they just burst on and they played Caroline. And that was it for me.
I would be the same because the thing that is said, you quite often hear disparaging opinions on Status Quo. It's pretty ridiculous. It's quite mean-spirited, but nobody hits that type of song like them. If you could give that song, you could give those songs to Steely Dan, it wouldn't sound like Quo. It is so massive. I saw them at the Castle, Edinburgh Castle, about 20 years ago, and it was absolutely enormous.
Yeah.
The sound, the rhythm, and you can say, well, it's been out a few years, but it doesn't always follow. And they were absolutely fantastic. So that is that the first time you were aware of the guitar in pop, if you like.
It would have been, yeah. There probably, that would have been in popular music around the house. You know, my dad was playing. He was playing. You know, country music was big in Northern Ireland. So you know, if I was to think of the albums in my mum and dad's record collection that I would have played, Buck Owens. Buck Owens live at Buck Owens and the Buckaroos live at Carnegie Hall, and even the Shadows great set. So there was guitar music around a house, and I would listen to it. But Quo was probably the first band that, you know, I just went, right, I like that. So it was 82. You know, I was 13 years of age. It was just right. This is the piano was getting pushed into the corner and the guitar was getting picked up. That was probably Quo were the driver for that.
The question that you can ask anybody is like, you know, like it's like when people say, what was the first single that you had, you know, and we all tend to like, you know, over.
What was your first single?
It was. I was lucky. I've got one that I don't have to fib about, because the first one I had was the Spencer Davis group, Keep 'Em Running.
That's a good one.
Which is quite a good one. But most of us will say our first single was like We Can Work It Out, Day Tripper by the Beatles, but it'll actually be Billy Don't Be a Hero, you know, in real life.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with Billy Don't Be a Hero, it's a pretty good song. But you know what I mean? So we tend to embellish. You know, like if you say what's the first gig you went to, you might say it was Slade, Susie Quattro and Thin Lizzy on the bottom of the ball. I didn't go to that, but a few of my friends did. But you may find that you'd seen Engelbert Humperdinck the year before or whatever. So that's another one we tend to embellish the thing. So what was the first song you played on guitar?
First song that I worked at. I did it the wrong way around probably. I because I haven't played piano, I had reasonable dexterity. So picking up the guitar, I was picking out melodies first. So I was picking out the melody. So the first melody that came to me on the guitar was Whiskey in the Jar.
Alright. Yeah.
So Whiskey in the Jar. I Lizzie was, once you've done Status Quo and then you're with your pals and your friends and you're starting to share records around. Somebody somewhere's elder brother has a copy of Live and Dangerous or or Back in Black or what was the other albums kicking around that time? Motorhead for us.
Leonard Skinner's first.
Yeah, absolutely.
When Led Zeppelin 4 is 72.
Yeah, there was lots of, so to me picking out, I can remember picking out the melody of Whiskey in the Jar on my dad's Telecaster.
Wow.
And then I went chords.
Right.
So it was like picking the notes out, etc. was what I enjoyed doing first. So Lizzie were big for me.
I saw, I don't know if you watched it, but I saw a video this week by Rob Chapman. Now I remember the Rob Chapman of old. You used to see him in music fairs and music shows. And he was just this demon, very passionate wailing guitarist. He was absolutely sensational. And basically what he was saying was, should people, categorise themselves as beginners, intermediates, advanced? And I'm really not in favour of that, but what he said next was very interesting. And he said that he felt the accumulation of gear, which we touched on earlier, and the understanding of gear has replaced in a lot of people's minds what you might call an ability on the instrument. And I think this is my big bugbear at the moment. And he was saying he thinks it's important to. Oh, I'll get back to why he thinks it. He thinks it's important to categorise yourself in a way, and I'm not sure I agree with that. But what he said next was really good, and he was saying when you're a beginner, the actual thrill of learning things is unbelievable, because it just seems like this world. We said we wouldn't just diddle away on the guitar, but I can remember when I was at 14 or 15, I would like absent-mindedly, you try and just play notes all over the board. And I can remember just going, I mean, whoa.
Yeah.
That's something. That's how they get that sound.
Well,
You know?
it
was magical.
what helped me, and what have probably maybe helped a lot of young guitar players, was on BBC Two. There was a great series, and I think you can watch it on YouTube.
Just Rock School.
Rock School.
Yeah.
And the the guitar player, the bass player, and the drummer, and then the second series brought a keyboard player in, and I can remember, I don't remember the lady's name who presented the guitar.
Deirdre Cartwright.
Good shout, Deirdre. And I can remember, and she played a lovely PRS. You know, it was she played a Schecter for a while, and then she had PRS.
Mm.
And I can remember when they were talking about rock guitar, and Gary Moore was on. He did a demonstration of his Boss pedals,
all of which went.
Exactly. It was a noise gate still exists, and I can just remember Deirdre going. She just went like, and you can do solos, and you can go. And then she did this. And then she did a...
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, wow, you can bend the notes and you can trill. And so Rock School for me was I suppose my version of YouTube. I recorded it. But then you had other great guitar players that would come on. But some of it, like Gary Moore, when he did his Boss pedals demonstration, he just went, well, here's a flanger, here's a chorus, here's an octaver, here's a little bit of gain, and he played some nice chords, etc. But he didn't sort of play stratospheric guitar and go, I'll never be like that. So Rock School to me was really, really good because they played it at such a level where you're going, oh, I get that, I can go and practice it. So that for me, Rock School was I was glued to that.
It's for younger viewers. It probably sounds incredible, but there was a time when there was virtually no music on television other than Top of the Pops, and I think that's why my generation definitely we have such fond memories, and it's purely nostalgia is always good, as they say, of seeing on one Thursday night on Top of the Pops you might see Jethro Tull, Black Sabbath, again, I'm maybe arranging this slightly to suit my argument. You might see Jethro Tull, Sabbath, Alice Cooper, Deep Purple, Focus, Pan's People, the whole thing. But you saw all these great bands. Now, when you look back on it, because they show them on Friday night on BBC 4 now, and there was a lot of stuff that you maybe didn't like so much. But you could see these things, but there wasn't a lot. There's a bit in one of Stuart McConaughey's books. I think it's Cider with Rosie. It's a coming of age growing up book that virtually everybody has had a go at writing. And he says he was once in his mum and dad's house on his own when there was no music on TV, and he'd gone through the channels by doing that before there were remotes. And he found this Disco 2, it was called. And they used to have like an hour-long concert, and it was the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And it's like, obviously in those days you didn't know music like Mahavishnu existed. Who were the first few guitarists? Did you have a favourite guitarist?
Oh yeah, Gary Moore.
Yeah, right. Was that around the? Well, you said Thunder and Lightning, didn't you? Right. I know Gary's not on Thunder and Lightning, but
no. Again, I have to thank BBC Two. So as you say, Thursday night was Top of the Pops, and then they started in 1983. It was a Radio 1 and BBC 2, is it simulcast or simulcast or whatever they call it.
You're meant to play it through your stereo and watch the TV
on TV at the same time. So the first time I saw Lizzie was on the farewell tour. So I saw Lizzie.
That's the Hitchin
show. So that was the first time I saw Lizzie live.
Yeah.
So that was with John Sykes, and that Hitchin show just was like just immense.
That's fantastic.
You know, and so I remember that fondly. Then and the sight and sound, they call it, sight and sound in concert.
Yeah.
But then they had other artists, so they'd have more maybe contemporary artists like Joan Armatrading, etc.
Tom Petty.
And then the next one that came along was, and obviously once you've bought the Lizzie album, you know, you bought Thunder Lightning, and then you go and you start reading the magazines and you go, right, well, who else has been a Lizzie? And then Gary Moore he did a warm-up show for the Victims of the Future tour where he was playing at Gold Diggers. I remember this. And Gary Moore came out and he played, that just blew me away. That was Red Stratocaster, Melody Maker. It was just, Gary just took it to a completely different level to me.
If anyone, you know, if you play guitar, you get asked this question all the time. The correct answer is, you know, I'm not in any position to say I've just got an opinion like everyone else. The question you get asked all the time is, who's the greatest guitar player of all time? And you know, obviously Hendrix is the one that springs to mind. If you ask me and push me, I will say Gary Moore. I'll always say Gary Moore, greatest guitar player ever. Who's your favourite guitarist? It's always Gary. Now after that, I've got about 8 that will change position.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do you know what I mean? But I mean, Gary is, and I saw him live, and I saw him at Coliseum too.
Okay.
Which was just unreal, you know, because he was the sort of rock aspect. He was the rock and roll aspect in that band, but this was like Fighting Talk, and he was doing all this stuff. And obviously, it's where his playing changed, if you like, the diminished scales came in, and you hear it on Back in the Streets as well. That kind of like half of it is rock and roll, like Lizzie, and half of it is like Coliseum too.
It is, yeah. There's lots of it. There's, you know, when you listen to the you know, Back in the Streets as an album, there is that mix, and you've got Mark Knopfler. When you look at the musicians that he's got on that album, he moves very, very easily between fusion and rock. You know, there's and some of the covers that he did, you know, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, and
that's got Devil in Our Heart.
Yeah.
Side, that's just unbelievable.
And that's so I remember, you know, Gary for me, you know, Victims of the Future was the album at the time. I went back out and I remember buying Corridors of Power, which to me is one of my favourite Gary albums. And I can remember going into a record shop in my hometown, and everything I'd bought, the only thing that they re-released it in the early 80s. I remember buying Grinding Stone, which was and I was like, I had to buy it. There's not many great tracks on it, but I had to buy it, you know.
I mean, Grinding Stone is the one that has that one.
Yeah. It's but Gary was it for me.
That's the space between Skid Row and Lizzie.
Yes.
First time in Lizzie. Because you hear a lot of times how Gary jumped ship and became a blues player, and it's absolutely not true, because if you look, you can get a reissued CD of Vagabonds of the Western World now. And it's got a whole bunch of stuff with Gary, obviously Little Darling, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a version of Slow Blues, and Gary does just a total Peter Green. You hear that really bluesy Peter Green thing. Obviously the guitar, everyone knows the story of the guitar that went from Peter Green to Gary. I saw him a lot in that year. I saw him with G-Force.
Alright, that'd be 1980.
Yeah. Very few people remember that. They played a Thursday night in Edinburgh, and the next night there was the support to Whitesnake.
Okay.
So you can see Gary 2 nights on the bounce. I've only ever done that with one other band, that's Wishbone. I used to go and see them in Edinburgh and then go through to Glasgow and see them the next night. Yeah. So who comes after Gary? Who are your
Who comes after Gary? As you say, there's kind of like there's the players. That what comes to mind for me is Rory Gallagher.
Mm-hmm. So
Steve Lukather. You know, when I look at the alumni that's in Lizzie, I love Scott Gorham. Scott Gorham's a fabulous guitar. Michael Schenker, and then modern players like Alan Murphy, Steve Farris from Mr. Mister. There's loads and loads. Those would be, and you try and think of people who you try and play, and even Joe Walsh to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
Knopfler, Gilmore, Jeff. Jeff Beck's one of those ones. Whenever you ask me who's my favorite guitar player, it's Gary. But who do I think's the best guitar player I've ever seen?
Jeff Beck.
It's Jeff Beck.
Right. I'm going for Gary. I've seen Jeff Beck a few times. I'm going for Gary on both counts and that one, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I think we have a mutual friend, Mark Anderson, and Mark and I we saw Jeff Beck after COVID, before COVID twice, so 3 times in about 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think the first time was with Narada, in the drums.
I was at that show.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a massive Narada fan, and I remember that night saying to Mark, what is that guitar sound? Because it's big, but it's not fuzzy. It's it sustains, but it's not really distorted. Yeah. It's clean, but it's powerful. Yeah. It was very hard to describe it. It was just this huge, massive sound that filled the concert hall.
Yeah. No, it was a great venue. But he's always Jeff's. I think I saw him the term maybe after when he had Vinnie Colaiuta. And Prince's bass player, Rhonda. Yeah. And it was just I was kind of sideways on from Jeff at the concert hall. Yeah.
Did you see we're going into difficult waters here? I think. Did you see the Johnny Depp show?
No, I didn't. No.
It was great. No. I've never seen anything like it. There's like an audience of like hardcore, mainly male people, and the other half of the audience was like girls going absolutely insane. And when Johnny came on, he broke the whole thing up. I thought it was great. A lot of people didn't agree.
He's a good player.
He's a good player. I saw them. I saw the Hollywood Vampires. Anyone who says that Johnny Depp can't play, you've got that wrong. Johnny Depp can play. So would that be the half dozen? Knopfler, Gilmore?
Yeah. I'm trying to keep a few back for my underrateds.
Right. Steve Farris. Yes. Have you seen what he's doing now? He's like a conservationist.
He is, yeah.
Land manager, something.
He is. He Steve Farris says he does a lot of effectively. He lives off grid, for want of a better words.
Yeah.
And he he does a lot of as you say, land management, restoration, and bringing places back so that you can reintroduce animals back into the wild and stuff. So, but I am ever hopeful that Mr. Mister will come back. Will come back to the UK. Steve Farris is just one of those. Welcome to the real world. 85, 86.
The singers had a fantastic career. He's sung in everything.
Richard Page. Yeah. So there's loads of there's kind of it's some of it's organic guitar playing, and then there's some players who are able to use the latest technology to take the guitar to a different place.
Yeah. I mean, for my favourite sound is a guy with a Les Paul through a Marshall. Just the same sound that would have been around, when I was first interested in the guitar. And, everybody had a marshal in those days. But the other thing is, if you went to see a band and said to your friends, "I saw this band last night," and they'd say, "Well, who?" I'd go, "It's that guy that plays the SG," because everyone only had one guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So you could describe a band in terms of, you didn't have to describe what anybody looked like. You could say, "It's that guy that plays the white Strat," or him, Whereas now, that sort of stuff's kind of hard to do. You know how Jeff, I don't know if you've ever seen this quote. Jeff Beck, once someone said to me, "You are the most imitated." And this is long before the stuff with the bar that he did in the latter years.
Yeah.
And he said, "The things that people imitate me doing are the aspects of my playing I don't like."
All right, okay.
And I take it what he means is when you hear people go, that stuff, it's pitch bend.
Yeah.
But, and Andy Powell, at Wishbone's the same. Andy Powell said, once that at an audition, it was a waste of time to come in and be a second-rate version of Andy Powell, because he said, because I am the first-rate version of Andy Powell. And the stuff in early Wishbone that sort of defines Andy, the stuff that, Beck used to do that. And I think it's like, maybe, and Andy did that whole, that. And then he stopped doing it. Which is probably the mark of really great players. That they move on, they progress to something else, where the rest of us are left copying that thing that they don't do anymore.
No. But I think I don't know Wishbone Ice that well, but when you look at the nice dynamic with Andy's playing and Laurie's playing, I love Laurie's playing.
Fantastic player.
Very, sadly, he didn't make it onto my list of 25 underrated guitarists.
I would have paid money.
A very, very good player. And that's where I think sometimes it's nice to have that contrast in players.
Laurie did "We Will Rock You" for a while in London
with Neil Murray. Yeah.
I have all the Home albums. That was really the first time I was aware of him. And Laurie used, in Home, he'd obviously come from a country background. And you'd play that. Or he'd. And I was like, who is this guy? And his playing was so different than Persephone. It's unlike anything you've ever heard. It's just not like any other guitar player. So who are your underrated guys?
Underrated guys? Oh, do you know what? Underrated guys. The two that...
Can we ping back and forward? You do one and I'll do one.
Okay, yeah. I'll kick off with Audley Freed.
I'll go with Audley Freed. Yeah. Audley Freed, for anyone who isn't aware, kind of exploded with a band called The Cry of Love. He ended up in a version of the Dixie Chicks.
He was in the Dixie Chicks for a while. I think he was.
Yeah. And I've got the two Black Crows for the Jimmy Page albums. He's on them.
Yes.
Incredibly respect. If you've got a taste for an Alan Collins, Gary Rossington style,
I would say very much. Yeah.
But when The Cry of Love came out, first time you listened to it, it was like, say, he had little bits of contemporary guys. Sometimes he'd give you like 10 seconds of Paul Gilbert. And then he'd go back to the Gary Rossington, Paul Kossoff, traditional. He had both things.
The second album, I didn't get Brother, which was the debut album. And it got a lot of play on Radio 1 in the UK. They toured supporting Robert Plant. Robert Plant was a big.
I never saw that. I've seen that too.
He was a big, strong advocate for the band.
And Bob Harris
as well, absolutely.
And
I remember when the second album came out, which is called Diamonds and Debris, they got a new singer in, and Audley's playing on that album is just they move away from the kind of the southern rock Leonard Skinner free feel, and it's just got its own more of a Hendrixy, Robin Troyer vibe to it.
Is it more? I've never heard that album. I mean, this is a funny thing. It's a debut album by a band that you absolutely love, and you can go around. A lot of people will say the same, and they'll then say they've got a second album, but I've never heard it.
Oh, it's Diamonds and Debris is a five. So yes, Audley's the first one off my list. Off my list.
I will go with, because if it's not Gary Moore, he is my favourite guitar player of all time, Ray Gomez.
Okay.
That would be my underrated guitar player. Now you could, if Gary Moore was out of the equation and someone said to me, so who's the best guitar player of all time? I'd have a really strong argument for saying Ray Gomez. You know, he's a fantastic rock player, great fusion player, great session player, Hall & Oates, Narada, etc.
Yeah.
But he did this fusion rock album, Volume, that his playing was just off the scale. I've got a Ray Gomez story. Actually, one Sunday I went to the local record shop, and this was in the days when you only ever had enough money to buy one record.
That's true, yes.
And I was looking through all the records. We used to do that, to flip through the vinyl. And I saw the Stanley Clarke, I Want to Play For You. And I was really big at the time. I really liked Lee Ritenour. And I'd always liked Jeff Beck. And there was a sticker on it saying this album features Lee Ritenour and Jeff Beck. But it was a double. So it was like $3.99. Right? And I was like, oh man, there'll be beans and toast till payday sort of thing. And I thought, no, I'm going to buy it. And I got home and there was a sheet that told you who played on every track. So I'm looking through all the songs. It's got like track 7, Lee Ritenour, track 9, Jeff Beck. But that was their complete contribution.
Yeah.
And I said, track 1, lead guitar, Raymond Gomez. I'm going, who's this? Who's this guy? And then School Days and Quiet Afternoon came on, and from that moment on, I was like, this guy's like up there. So Ray Gomez would be mine.
Yeah, and I know he's done lots of sessions. Ray's done loads of sessions.
That's one of the big ones. And again, I mean, we both do the YouTube thing, but I quite often say my favourite guitar solo is Twisted, Jacket Can.
Yeah.
Gary. On my favourite Gary solo. What's your favourite Gary solo?
Favourite Gary solo? Oh my goodness.
Sad, isn't it?
Okay, I'm gonna go for 2 because I love Gary's solo and Still in Love with You with Thin Lizzy.
The Nightlife. Yeah.
I love that version.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
And I love the original. I love on the Victims of the Future, on the original version of Empty Rooms. I like the constructive Empty Rooms solo. I think
and he's really holding it back and more. You're on the edge of your seat, and then eventually, oh, it's just incredible.
It's you.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace, both of them.
Okay.
Rest in Peace is a ballad that hardly anyone's heard because it's an album called Dirty Fingers. That I think was in the middle of Gary's contractual things.
That was Jet Records.
Yeah, it was on Jet, it was on MCA, it was on Virgin,
it
was on everything. I don't think I got in an import. And Rest in Peace is just a very atmospheric song. It's got one of these magic chords, it's like the F chord with the open E. It kind of puts you on edge. And he plays a melodic solo with the bar, and then he plays a wailing one at the end. So those two.
Okay.
Devil in Our Heart.
Yeah.
I'd have that there. Because it's just hysterical. It's just like, plugging into the mate. And, he was like that all the time. There's a really interesting quote from Gary Moore for anyone who's ever wanted to play fast. And I think all of us at some time would say, I really fancy being a fast guy. Gary used to say that the speed came from the adrenaline of playing live. He would say that, if sitting down, then it's hard. I find it next to impossible to play speedy stuff on a day-to-day basis. I need everything to be sweaty and loud, and the adrenaline of it, and then and like him 10 times to a greater extent. And he said that thing, speed comes from the adrenaline. Now you will get guys, especially in the modern post-Paul Gilbert age, that's a thing. The thing is to be able to pick up any instrument in 30-second notes, alternate picked. But you can't do everything.
No.
You can't do everything.
No.
Who's the next one?
David Grissom.
I saw him as well. I've seen him twice.
So have I.
with two completely different bands?
I've only seen him solo.
Right.
I saw him play at Darvel.
Darvel on the way to Kilmarnock?
Yes.
Right, I know it is.
He played Darvel Festival.
Wow.
He was doing an Italian tour, and they invited him over, and I basically watched David Grissom with his 3-piece band play in what can be best described as a community hall, Darvel, and David Grissom was just so. Yeah, so David Grissom for me, I was lucky enough when I started to play in the northeast of England. I used to go to an open mic night, and the guy who ran the open mic, the bar manager, massive blues fan, and he used to play Storyville's second album.
Everyone likes that. I've never heard that.
Piece of My Soul, and he would play Bluest Eyes, which is the debut album.
Yeah.
But I just fell in love with the songwriting of David Grissom and his guitar playing, and he's got that. For me, he's got that tone.
The first time I saw him live, and I had Joe Ely's Lord of the Highway album, and David Grissom is wailing all over that. Joe Ely was the support to Robert Cray.
Wow.
So that was the first time I saw it, and he had the powder blue, like you said, the powder blue PRS.
Yeah.
And the next time I saw him was about 3/4 way through a show. I've seen this happen a couple of times when you're watching a show and you suddenly go, wait a minute, is that guy on stage David Grissom? And it was when he was with the Dixie Chicks. He was the musical director.
Yeah, and he struggled. There was a time when actually Audley and David were both in the Dixie Chicks.
I mean, that makes it like the 2-guitar band of all time.
It does.
Yeah,
but
I love the Dixie Chicks, but that, you can't. That's
when you look at that, when you look at the band, and it's interesting when you listen to two great guitarists who can play with Marshalls and all of the big gear, and that was when you listen to Audley talk about it, both David and him were in-ears, because you've got the acoustic instruments that the Dixie Chicks were playing. They were having to go, ISO cabinets off stage, and it was the first time they were using in-ears, and it was like Audley's a bar and club guy, as is David Grissom. So there was a real education for him to move away from the wind wafting behind your ankles from 4x12.
I think there's a massive, I'm definitely in that camp. There's a massive, maybe part of it is that's the way I've always done it, and I don't want to change. It's perhaps not a good thing. But there's also, I love the idea of being on stage, and you take 2 steps that way, and you hear this, and then you go back, and you hear that, and you can effectively make yourself as loud or as not loud as you want to be. But if you want to hear the other guitarist, you can find some pitch on the stage to stand on, and I just like there's the amp, and I like this cacophony of volume coming out of that. It's changed so much.
So and David Grissom's setup, his amps, his pedals, for many years I was, I have my love for full tone pedals is all to do with David Grissom.
Right.
Great player, and played with he sat in with the Allman Brothers at a minute's notice, etc. Just very tasteful player.
Yeah. Next one.
Next one, Keith Scott.
Yeah.
From Bryan Adams' band. I don't think when you're looking at underrated guitar players,
he's got to be in that.
I've seen Bryan Adams, 8 or 9 times, and Keith's always been in the band. He's never dropped the notes, and he plays a very simple setup. And a good backing singer. Keith Scott, and everybody talk. We all know the big hits, the Summer of '69. But if you listen to the Into the Fire album,
It's Native Son.
Yeah, that's sort of solo.
Really
He's very, very good. So
you know how we've all got things that you when you get into the car, you hum the same tune every day, and some of us have been doing it for 20 years, the same song, and it's not necessarily something that you'd play on your stereo at home, but you have this song. One of my main ones is Hearts on Fire.
Yeah.
It's a bit where it's Heart of Fire that. That one.
It's got a country feel to it.
That's the way he plays, isn't it?
It's a real nice country feel to it.
And that one, I find myself coming out the shower and humming that bit, and then I'm setting up my amp going, and he's got loads.
Yeah,
it's not an isolated one. He's got the big hit, the Robin Hood one.
Oh yeah. And it's when you can hum the guitar lines in a song.
Very few people at his level are like maybe Joe Walsh.
Joe Walsh, the other player that comes to mind, and I don't have this player in my underrated category because I think a lot of people rate him, is Neil Sean. Neil Sean is one of those guitarists where you can't call him underrated when he's got the biggest selling streaming song of all time. But melodically, Neil Sean, you can sing the guitar solos for Who Crying Now and Don't and Stone of Love.
Santana stuff.
Yeah. And that's probably an era of Neil Sean's playing that does get overlooked. That gets overlooked is that period of time when he was barely out of his teens.
Yeah, Santana
playing with Santana.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know the story, Neil Sean had to pick between Derek and the Dominoes and Clapton and Carlos Santana when he was still cycling to get to the rehearsal rooms. Because he tells a story about when he got to the rehearsal rooms where Santana were working up Santana 3. They'd said, Eric Clapton's been on the phone, he wants you to come to the Fillmore West.
Yeah.
And he got on stage with, and Eric Clapton said, I'll bring you out in 3 songs.
Yeah.
As you know, when you go to a show, band plays and then someone says, we've got a special guest, bring him out. And he said, Eric Clapton was just looking at him like, woo, this teenage kid sounds like me. Yeah. And he was saying he knew all the solos upside down. Like Eddie Van Halen says he knew every Eric Clapton solo ever was. Yeah. Those are definitely 2 good ones. Yeah. I would throw into the mix, and this is a lesser known guy, is Danny Johnson.
From
Derringer.
Derringer, alright.
That Danny Johnson.
Davy Johnson, sorry.
Yeah, yes. Danny Johnson was like, I think he was about 20 or 21 when he joined Derringer. He did the first 2 albums, all the live stuff. He then left. Basically, they formed a Derringer without Rick, which was Axis, which is what they'd been before in Louisiana. And he then cropped up in Rod Stewart's band.
Right.
And then he cropped up in Private Life, who were the only band ever to be produced, as far as I know, by Eddie Van Halen.
All right, I never knew that.
Thought would have guaranteed about 500,000 sales.
Yeah.
And for the last 20 years, he's been in Steppenwolf. But Danny Johnson is a completely idiosyncratic. In fact, there's a Danny Johnson lick that this one only took me about 30 years to play, and it's in a song called Sailor. And for years, I would hear this lick and go, "What is he playing that?" And I used to think it, and then I thought, could it be? And he does some really idiosyncratic thing. He does a major minor thing, like Clapton.
Yeah.
But what he also does is, and he'll jump the octave. Yeah. That's a real Danny Johnson lick. Yeah. And that lick, where he actually plays this. And I was like, what is he playing?
Uh-huh.
And he, you know, and 76, he was doing the whole two-handed thing.
Yeah.
Way before.
Yeah.
Anyone else. So that would be my underrated guy.
Yeah.
And one that we both like, Pat Thrall.
We do. I'm a bit. I think Pat. You know, I don't know much of Pat's prior material when he was with
Automatic Man.
Yeah, I know all the stuff that he did with Pat Travers. You know, you talked to you know Noonan Bettencourt when he talks about his 5 favourite guitarists.
Paul Gilbert's a big fan as well.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Pat Thrall's in there. But I remember when Pat did Hughes Thrall. Hughes Thrall is just you know, I'm a massive Glenn Hughes fan. Through all of the projects that Glenn's been involved in, but I remember buying on imports, and I went to a CD shop in Newcastle, and they did imports, and I picked up Hughes Thrall were signed to Columbia.
My CD is on Epic. It's a pale blue, which is a subset of Columbia.
And it's and that, you know, Hold Out Your Life. You know, it's just Pat's guitar playing. Pat's guitar playing on that album, and I know you'll probably agree with me on this, is when you hear the guitar playing, and that album was recorded in 1982.
Yeah.
And you listen to Gary Moore in 1985 doing Run for Cover.
Yeah.
And there's a track on the there's tracks on the album. It was a B-side of one of the singles on Run for Cover. It's a track called Out of My System, which Glenn Hughes sings on. And you listen to the whammy bar and the guitar processing on that. That is just classic Pat Thrall. And even when he's doing Reach for the Sky, you know, Gary's doing, you know, some pinch harmonics, and even there's 2 guitar solos in it. It's just, to me, when Gary when he went to the, you know, the single Humbucker Charvel with the Floyd, that was just, to me, he was, you know, that was a period I liked. And then you got into Run for Cover, but if you go back and listen to Hughes Thrall and Pat Thrall's playing, you're kind of going, must have been such I wouldn't say Gary was moving with the times, and Pat Thrall was one of those players.
Well, have you ever seen the sleeve notes on G-Force?
I haven't.
It's his inspiration, Pat Thrall.
Does it really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Because, sorry to pick up the guitar again, but a thing that I've said on YouTube lots of times to people is, what do you call this? Right? Is this? Do you call it the Pat Thrall lick, or do you call it the Gary Moore lick, or do you call it the Doug Aldrich lick?
To me, that's the Gary. That's Gary. That's Gary Moore.
Couldn't it?
Yeah.
On for a while, but
because that's, you know, it was a at the kind of end of the world, and that's you know, to me, that's Gary. But then when he's, you know, that's pure tone fingers. It's then when you get into the subtleties of, you know, that 84, after 84 with Gary, you're getting the, and there's a, and the Jeff Beckman's, yes,
he does,
and that's where I think Gary's playing slowed down a little bit, because he was being expressive through like the whammy bar. So Pat Thrall. Another guitarist I have to chuck into the mix, because every time Thin Lizzy have gotten back together, the one person. There's two people I would always would have thought would have been a shoo-in for the Gary Moore side, the Brian Robertson side.
We've obviously always played this game in our head. Who would be like?
Yes.
It's like putting together your ultimate football team. It's like who would Jonathan Lizzie? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's two guys. First one for me, and it's purely down to tone. I love his playing is John Norum from Europe. I those people that know me know I love Europe. It's not all about the Final Countdown. It is John Norum is playing, and even when he went solo and he did the solo album with Total Control, and he
always did a Lizzie song.
He did. He does Opium. He does a great version of Opium Trail.
The last time I saw them, I was standing about as close as I am to my front window there, and it's just like it's like 2 4x12s and 2 GC 900s.
Yeah.
Very simple setup.
Very.
And it was out there. So I would say he is the closest to Gary.
Yes.
Viv as well.
And that was my second.
Yeah.
Vivian.
I saw Viv with Lizzie.
I saw him on the Glasgow show, and in some ways it was there was 4 guitar. We had Scott, Ricky, Warwick, Richard Fortis.
Oh, he was there.
Richard Fortis was there because Vivian was, as he called himself, stunt guitarist, just having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But Vivian had a very, very simple setup. The Engels, I don't think if he had a wah-wah pedal.
Yeah.
He just and he played I think he played like a Yamaha double cutaway and a nice Les Paul, and it was the purest sound that Vivian had. So that's and then so Vivian, John Norum, and Pat McManus, who I'm a massive fan of from back home. I've seen Pat doing the Vibe for Fellow, and he'll play some Gary. He'll always play a few Gary tunes, etc. So
I'm always amazed that neither Pat Travers or Pat Thrall, because they obviously knew each other socially.
Yes.
With Scott and Brian playing on the albums.
Yeah.
You'd think that every time there's a gap, and there was a gap lots of times. You'd imagine sooner or later they're a nap to come into the band, but they never did.
Never did, and I suppose where Pat Thrall and the only band that Pat Thrall and Scott collaborate or did anything on was Asia, because Pat Thrall did. He replaced. I would have been Steve Howe was well gone. Mandy Meyer would have been the guitarist in Asia, and Pat Thrall came in.
Yeah, I bought the DVD. I think it's in Russia.
It is in Russia.
And there's one point where Pat Thrall, because you see Pat Thrall with Meatloaf on TV from time to time.
Yeah.
And there's one point where Pat Thrall goes into Pat Thrall mode.
Yes.
And it's just breathtaking. It's just
it really is good.
I've seen it live.
Never seen Pat.
And it's like David Grissom. It's like that guy there. He kind of looks a bit like. And about 86, I went to see. I'm a massive Springsteen fan, and my other underrated guy, is a guy underrated if he's toured the world like 100 times is Nils.
I didn't put Nils because I wouldn't have put. I don't think Nils Lofgren is underrated.
Because everybody knows who he is.
Exactly. Yeah, but when you look at the credits, bizarrely, I know Nils Lofgren. The first time I really heard him was when he played all of the guitars on Lou Graham's first solo. Ready or Not?
Viv's on it as well, isn't he?
Viv's on the second. He's on the. Vivian plays on the second album. And Dan,
Dan Huff's a good call, by the way. He's the greatest player of all time. That's another one. Yeah. Dan Huff's out of this world. Dan's
Dan's work again. The first time I ever heard Dan was on the Here I Go Again American edits
the
of
radio mix.
He did the radio mix of it.
He did indeed.
And it's like you have, because John Sykes obviously never did the solo for, he was gone by that time. Adrian Vandenberg does he does the album version, which I have to say, I do have Adrian down there as one of my underrated guitarists.
Yeah.
But when I listen to when you listen to the American radio mix and you hear Dan, that's the mix. So that was Dan, and then when he does when Giant comes out with the first album.
I'd actually heard him on the radio on, I think it was Tommy Vance's program, and Tommy Vance played these tracks by a band it's actually a person called Van Stevenson.
Okay.
And there was this absolutely blitzkrieg guitar, and it was, in the guitar world, it seems like all the time you go, who is that guy? Yeah. And he seemed like he'd been around the block quite a while. That was an early point in his career, and then he was on a Vanity album from Prince.
Okay, yeah.
And he did this alternate picking blitzkrieg thing that was fantastic, and then of course Giant. But then, I have hundreds of country albums that Dan have sung.
Yeah.
Mindy McCready's one of my favourite solos ever. Some guys do it all the time. But sorry, my Pat Thrall, when I saw him live, right, went to the Playhouse to see Little Stephen and the Disciples of Soul.
Alright, okay, yeah.
And it was one of these things, the Ramones were the same, where you look up at the stage and you think, these guys all look like 8 feet tall. So there's Miami, T.M. Stevens, who died recently, the bass. Yeah. They've all got stacked heels and snakeskin boots and long coats like a duster, and they've got bandanas and scarves and shades, and they all look from a different planet.
Yeah.
And there's this front line, as I say, all 8 foot tall, of TM, Miami, and this guy there. And after there wasn't much Pat Thrall style guitar.
No.
After about half an hour, he played something, and you go, well, this guy's really, really good. And then I was like, that's Pat Thrall. And that was his tenure with Miami and Steve.
Wow.
That's the only time I've seen him. I didn't see him, because the double bill the tour was Journey and Pat Travers, which would be one of the guitar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of all
absolutely.
Time. Do you know that the Hugh Straw album, that wouldn't have happened if the Glenn Hughes Power Trio, which is Glenn Hughes, Narada and Ray Gomez, had happened. And on the reissue of the Hugh Straw album, Pat Thrall says, I couldn't improve on Ray's solo Coast to Coast, which both of us really like. Yeah. That was Ray's solo, and Pat Thrall decided to learn it and do it on the album. Yeah.
And then I was lucky enough to see Trapeze when they were formed in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And Mel Galley,
who went to Whitesnake.
Mel, whenever Mel played Coast to Coast, he plays a solo which is very much like and that was a Trapeze recorded song.
Yeah.
But Mel, they kind of fused the versions of it.
Yeah.
Mel Galley, very
Yeah.
Trapeze.
See, I would have said Doyle Bramhall, but again, everybody knows him because of Clapton. There he is. Doyle Bramhall. And I would have said Charlie Sexton, but again.
Yeah, I think you gravitate. It's funny with the Archangels because I'm just drawn to Doyle. It's funny when you like a band. I
when you have a favourite within a band,
you always have to me, I think you always naturally go. If you're looking at a band, you're going right. Which guitarist do I prefer? Maybe do I prefer, or their tone or the way they play is more pleasing to my ear?
Adrian Smith or Dave Murray?
Exactly. I would be Adrian Smith.
I love Adrian. Yeah, they're both great, but I love Adrian.
Yeah, there's a technique to Adrian Smith
and elegance as
well. It does. Dave Murray's very wah. He's fleet of fingers,
and you can tell the most important thing. One of them is these guys. You can tell it's him.
Yes.
Carlos is obviously the paradigm of that.
Yeah.
But you hear one bit of Dave Murray, you go, yeah, it's him. That's what he does.
Yeah. Dave Murray. But so if I looked at Dark Angels, I go Doyle.
Yeah. What an album though.
Oh, it's a debut album. You know, good, good. You know, at Good Times is probably one of those. But again, it's one of those tracks in itself.
Yeah.
Where